Greetings and welcome back to the Relationship Schools podcast here. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis. What's going on? Happy to be here and psyched about our guest today. If you're a parent, you're going to enjoy this. And if you're not a parent, don't worry. There's still many valuable tips. Also, if you're a therapist, a coach, some kind of healer, there's a really cool front section of this podcast where my guest talks about her own empathic nature and what she had to do to tighten that game up, because some empaths are more like fused to everybody, taking on everybody's feelings. Some empaths are like overly helping, and you're never going to believe what she says about the healer empath person. It's kind of confronting. So I think you're going to like this. All right. If you're new, this podcast is all about partnership, long-term relationship, and becoming a relational warrior. It's an awesome part of our lives. We may as well make it good. Okay. This podcast helps with that. Okay. If you have not subscribed to this podcast, please do on your phone. If you've got an iPhone, you just go to the podcasts app rather than iTunes. You actually go to the podcast app. All right. And make sure you, in the search bar, just type in Smart Couple or Relationship School, and it comes up, and then hit subscribe. All right. That helps us if we get more subscribers like you. And then you get notified as soon as a new episode comes out. It just pops up on your phone. Okay. We're working on getting on Google Play. I think we're almost there. Thanks, Casey, for that. All right. And leave us a review, please. Okay. Holland, Hawaii said, amazing podcast that goes so deep. I've learned so much about me and my relationship. It forces me to take responsibility for me. Yes. That's what we're about here. All right. I will challenge you over and over to take responsibility. Stop blaming other people. Take responsibility. It's extremely empowering. And yes, it's confronting. Okay. Dr. Shefali is my guest today, and she's been on Oprah. She's like an Oprah Super Soul Sunday gal. She's got events, books. She's gotten 3 really great books. I just got her book, The Conscious Parent. So I'm digging into that. And she's got classes. She is a clinical psychologist, i.e. a therapist, who helps people in their, relationships and their parenting and all that stuff. I think she's most well known for she's kind of the conscious parent person. So a lot of her interviews out there on YouTube, et cetera, about conscious parenting and how do we deal with kids, troubled teens, discipline, et cetera. And this woman's got a lot to say. Okay, she's very deep. She's very wise. She's got a lot of cool life experience. So in the beginning of the episode, we dig into some of that. It's actually pretty cool to hear about her, how she became a therapist, basically, and what she had to do to kind of clean up her empathness that was getting in the way in her life. Some of you therapists might relate, coaches. I asked her 6 really pointed questions. I asked her a lot of questions, but here's a couple. How do you approach parents without blaming them? I want to challenge parents personally. Some of you parents, I want to challenge you to step up even more than you are. And sometimes it can come across as parents feel judged. Oh, and then they collude with each other and kind of let each other off the hook and actually don't do anything different. So, your kids are often acting out for a reason, and it's time to investigate. So there's some good tips in here, right? I asked her about, do kids need parents to stay married in order to successfully develop? So that's an interesting one. If you're a divorced parent or you're thinking about divorce, that's good to listen to. There's just a lot. And really the path that she teaches, which I love and resonate with, I also teach, which is parents, when your kids are triggering you, you got to do the work. And your kids won't trigger you as much anymore, and you'll actually give them room to be themselves. So many times parents are putting their values on their kids. So let's get right into it with Dr. Shefali. Grateful for her time. Check it out. All right, welcome to the show, Shefali.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm grateful to get a little time with you. You have been an inspiration for me, and I imagine many of our listeners just in the realm of parenting and waking up as adults here. So thanks for just all that you do.
You're welcome. Thank you for all you do.
Cool. So Shafali, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm so curious how you got into writing about conscious parenting and became a psychotherapist. Just give us a little backstory.
Well, I went to school, got my PhD, but really my real schooling happened in Vipassana, which is a form of meditation. And I began meditating when I was 21 and really awakened to a whole new way of looking at the world and the self. It was just epiphanic. So 21, I got all these insights, but I was still young and tethered to the real world. So it's been a process over the last 25 years of integrating all that I've learned. And so when I became a parent, I began seeing very clearly how all the stuff about attachment, possession, control, fear that I was learning in meditation and in therapy with all my clients was now coming to full blossom in the parent-child relationship. I was possessive, I was controlling, I was fear-riddled, and I was going insane and driving my child insane. So it was this moment of when everything, all that I learned in psychology, all that I learned in Eastern mysticism, and all of my experiences as a parent kind of came together. And I just realized that, oh my goodness, the parenting paradigm is all delusion. And how can I share this with the world? And I just began writing, and I can just tell you, I didn't have an agent, I didn't have a publicist, I didn't have a secretary. And I just wrote, and the book created its own force field. And I know this sounds woo-woo, but it's the truth. I don't remember doing anything, but I wrote it. I believed in it passionately. And that's all I did. And I showed up for it, so I did do that part.
Yeah. Thanks for allowing yourself to be a vehicle there. Now, before you got your PhD and you studied psychology, what kind of youngster were you? What kind of teenager were you? Or what kind of kid were you that would eventually pursue psychology? What was going on in your life?
Yeah, I was always super, super sensitive, empathic, always wanted to give. I knew that my mission in life was to give and teach and educate, but like many children, I wanted to be a teacher. But that's what I ended up. I am a teacher.
Yeah.
Really, I am.
Yeah, so cool. Do you find now that your sensitivity, just a side question here, that your sensitivity, given, that you have a following and a lot to do here and bigger responsibilities, do you find, how do you work with that? How do you work with your own empathic sensitivity in such a intense world with social media and everything going on?
Yeah. My biggest lesson, spiritual lesson for the life form was to create boundaries. And my empathy didn't show up so much as absorbing people's energy. That wasn't my empathic slant. Mm-hmm. My empathic slant was I didn't know how to say no. So I realized early on in my 30s that I'm really a pushover because I'm afraid. And my spiritual lesson is not to give. For many people, their spiritual lesson is to give, learn to give, learn to give.
Yeah.
My spiritual lesson is not just to receive, but to really not give. And that was counterintuitive to me. But I was giving in an unhealthy way and not giving myself. So I had to learn to not give. That was my big lesson as a super empath. But now that I've kind of learned that, I have begun to see that my empathy was delusional. Because I was empathic because I couldn't tolerate someone else in pain, correct?
Exactly.
I couldn't tolerate their discomfort. But that was all delusional because somebody going through discomfort or pain, I now see as a great invitation, as a portal. I'm like, let's do it. So now I don't rescue, right? Because I spiritually understand. You need to go through the pain. And now I honor pain. Now I welcome it. Now I'm so comfortable with it. But back then, my empathy, which seemed so innocent and, self-martyring, was really out of my own selfishness that I couldn't tolerate pain. Yeah. And empaths need to understand that, that they are also a little bit self-absorbed.
Oh, yeah, totally. Thank you for that. Calling forward that part of us. There's a lot of, I want to hang out here for a minute and then we're going to get into some parenting questions because I have so many for you. This is really interesting to me though, because we have a lot of therapists and coaches that listen to the show. And so what's one tip for someone who's like you that gives, and is always helping their friends and helping everybody out and their family. They're helping the addict. They're like kind of stuck in that pattern. What's like one thing they can do to like reel that in?
The thing I tell empaths is that they have a heavy dose of narcissism in them. And they're like, what? Me? I'm not a narcissist. And I go, yes, you are, because you are very attached to your being comfortable in rescuing people so you don't have to experience the pain or let them experience pain. And in that, you are self-absorbed. Yeah. You're not thinking what is spiritually good for my client and what's spiritually good for person X. You're jumping in there, appears good, but it really is short-circuiting that person's right to their pain.
That's right.
And you need to not interfere. By putting yourself in there, you're self-absorbed and thinking, oh, I'm so superior, I can rescue everyone, I can cure everyone, I can heal everyone. And while that instinct is good, we have to channel that instinct to being a powerful guide, being a powerful watcher, a witnesser, but not jumping in there and taking away that person's raw experience with their raw life, and that's what empaths do. And then they burn out too. So what's
exactly? It doesn't really work.
And they don't teach the other person any skills.
Right. They're not actually helping the other person.
No.
Yeah.
They're so attached in being Mother Teresa's that's what the attachment is. That's where their narcissism is. I'm the rescuer of the world.
Yeah. So I'm hearing two things for the listener, you guys listening, is one is take responsibility for the kind of narcissistic ways you help people, that it's really for you probably, and get more okay with pain. Get more okay with your own pain so that you can be more okay with other people's pain. That's kind of my takeaway there.
Yeah. We therapists sometimes overstep our helping role and we rob, I use strong words just to keep people in line. We rob people of their own right to their own experiences. This is it for parents too.
Yeah.
Our children, our clients, they have a right to their tears. They have the right to experience the divorce their way. They have a right to experience their cancer. We can't take it away from them, but that's our desire because it's too uncomfortable for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me transition into some parenting questions since you sort of alluded to that. The first question is kind of a bigger question that I'm sure you've received and you think about and have dealt with, but it's like, how do you approach parents without them feeling blamed? Because so many parents like protect themselves, and even parents will like collude, like, and they kind of throw their kids under the bus, but like they actually need to be confronted, they need to be challenged to step up their game, their parenting game. So how do you do that in a way that has them not feel blamed? Or like, how do you work with that? And how do you teach that?
Yeah, I tell them straight away when they come to my workshops. I tell them, when you leave here, you're going to be drowning in guilt and shame and wanting to drink a lot. And I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you some truths that are going to make you squirm, and you're not going to like me, and you're going to be very defensive. So I right away acknowledge the resistance.
Yeah.
And then I tell them that if you go there, you're going to thwart the learning. You're going to block the learning. But I get it. I'm the most defensive parent as well. And then I empathize because I am. I don't want anyone to criticize me. I'm so defensive. So I understand. I have great empathy for our defenses. We do everything technically out of love. The love is just a bit tainted,
Yeah, exactly, with our own stuff, which we're going to get into. Do you think the society, like a lot of the problems in the world, given your skills and your training and your, just your experience, do you feel like it's a big parenting problem out there? Like, would you tie it into parenting and how we raise children, or how would you see it?
No, I think parenting is big because, of course, we're raising children. But the bigger problem is a mental illness, really. We're kind of mentally ill, all of us. We're, and I'm being very blunt, but we are all asleep, and we are all seduced and hypnotized and zombified. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. But don't you think, like, how did we get that way? Like, isn't that like, let's say we have attachment issues and we're just trying to fill the void, and we're disconnected because as a little kid, we got really scared and we didn't feel seen. And so we went to our phones or whatever we went to.
Right. How did we get this way? Well, this is the way of this dimension. It's full of unworthiness and a lack of divinity, because we've been raised. But this is this dimension. Yes, the 99.9% of this dimension are raised on a diet of unworthiness and separation, and the institutions we have created all foster separation and unworthiness. All of them, if you look at all of them, education, religion, marriage, monogamy, beauty, wealth, status, achievement, all institutional ways of being in this world foster and perpetuate a deep sense of unworthiness and separation. So this is this dimension. Now, the people who you can call light workers or healers or consciousness raisers are trying to shake people to make them realize, like we're banging on the door to go, hey, don't believe what this dimension is telling you.
Yeah.
You know, don't raise your arms, don't enter violence. You know, there is love, we are one. And we're trying to raise the flag of oneness, but it will be an eternal cry from our throats that will only be answered by a few, because it is the nature of this dimension to be mentally ill. You know, we just keep doing it over and over again to every generation, to every child. And that's what I'm trying to do in my own little, very small way. I'm not pretending to make any big change here. Is to help people wake up to the reality that there's a different way to live, there's a different way to relate, there's a different way to enjoy and be in joy. And it's available. If people are ready, it's available. But if they're not ready, that's fine.
Yeah.
Then they live in fear and separation and violence.
What do you teach people? What would you say to, just like, again, another tip here for someone who is feeling and they're stuck in that unworthy place and they're reaching outside themselves? Like, what's the tip there?
Well, it's not a tip, it's a process, right? And then we undergo a process like what you do with your people. You know, you psychologically unlayer, unfold them to their inner child, how their inner child was wounded. And then we talk about how culture has messed them up and what they've believed is false and a lie. And that's the process of waking up. It's a deep internal process. I tell people, don't come to me, you know, asking me for 3 golden tips. Are you willing to go through a process that's going to take a minimum of 2 years, right? This is serious work. It's like,
Absolutely.
It's like a person who's 100 pounds overweight saying, give me 3 tips to change. I go, yeah, it's going to take you 2 years. Are you ready for 2 years? I can give you the 3 tips, but those 3 tips will take you 2 years to change. Nothing changes in a few months. Everything takes at least a few years, right? So are we willing to change our lives?
So refreshing to hear you say that in the world of kind of quick tips. So thanks for reminding us how intense and long and arduous the journey can be sometimes, right? Like, we got to make a journey.
Look at having a baby. It doesn't happen right away. Sometimes it happens right away, but then it still takes 9 months.
Oh, and then you got to learn how to, like, hold this little thing. And, like, it actually goes on. That's the beauty of this parenting path, is it goes on forever. There's never a moment where you're not going to be challenged, you know?
And it's never the same, and it's always impermanent, and it's dynamic, and that's life. And so it is with self-growth. You know, people want the one thing, the one phrase, the one sentence, the one key. And that's not how self-growth works, you know?
Awesome. Parenting question. When you're, I'll start broad and then I can get specific. When a parent is, like, wrestling with, let's say 2 parents, mom and dad, are tuning into their 10-year-old, 9-year-old, and they're like, okay, something's going on here. We can't quite put our finger on it. And our kid is just, like, defiant or acting out or really angry. And the parents are awake enough to know, okay, there's something going on. We're tracking our child well. And yet the kid doesn't have the language yet for it. And they don't even know. They're just acting the way they act. And the parents are awake enough to go, what's my part in this? How can I see myself? What's my child bringing to me? How do you start to work with that?
Well, you know, to teach the parent that their reactivity is going to further explode the situation, number one. So we tame the parent's reactivity to a silent place where we can truly understand what's going on with the child. You see, it's very difficult for any parent to say, my child, my child, my child, as if they are not part of that dynamic. Every parent is coloring and deeply impacting the child's behavior. So it's very hard for a parent to say it's the child. I can't believe that, and I never do. Yeah. So first I get the parent to a state of quietude and and neutrality, where they're not reacting all the time. And I can guarantee you, just by doing that, the child's behavior changes. Because the parent doesn't realize their emotional energy, that what they're bringing to the situation. They don't see that the kid is reacting to the clenched jaw, to the distracted gaze, to the hurried pace. They're not, the parent is like, I'm just being myself. No, you have an emotional charge that the kid is responding to. Yeah. And if you react to whatever the kid is doing every moment of the day, the kid is going to now be caught in this back and forth dynamic with you, which you're not even aware of. Yeah. So first step is to reduce the parent's reactivity. Second one is to begin to really observe the child. What does my child need right now? Is it physical fatigue, hunger, thirst, something going on physically? Is it emotional lack of connectivity that they're seeking? Is it a rule, quote unquote, a boundary, a safety issue? What's going on? Mm-hmm. But we can only pay attention to the inner need once we quieten our own reactivity.
Yeah, that's great. I remember when my son was about 5, I started working more because I was a part-time stay-at-home dad until my son was about 5. And then I took on a lot more work and started to grow my business. And he, naturally reacted. And he wasn't like, Dad, I don't want you to work as much, because he was 5. But he just started acting out, right? And what we did, and what we realized was he just needs me to be present and connect with him. And give him he was afraid, it seems like to me, that Daddy was going away. And once I just took him out in nature and we just did a few things together, and it immediately changed the dynamic back to we're good again, right? But I had to really, like you said, sit with my discomfort. And because initially the parents, my response is, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? And I just want to, right? And then if I can get out of that reactivity, then I have the space, like you're saying, to think clearly, collaborate with my wife, and then we come up with a plan. But a lot of it for our family is about connection. Like our kids need to feel seen and connected with, right? That solves most of our problems.
All of it is always a thirst for connection and presence. All of it. And especially if you change your routine, if you're not available, you will pay, quote unquote, pay the price for not being there. You'll be more ready to show up the next day, ready to connect. But parents feel put upon. Oh, why you be complaining? Why are you upset? I was just working. Parents get all defensive instead of understanding that they need to be this container for their children's feelings, and they need to give the child. It's the child who's hungry, not the parent. The parent needs to have filled their own tank.
That's right. Shafali, give us your bigger view on parenting, just for the new listeners that aren't familiar with you. Because a lot of, in a nutshell, I think what you say is awesome, because it's about the parent. If you're triggered by your son or daughter or your child, it's an opportunity to look in the mirror and look at your own unfinished business and heal. So I know that's probably way dumbed down, but can you expand on that and give us your take on the view of what you teach parenting?
Yes. So in a very big way, I don't know whether you can hear me because you froze.
Yeah, I got you now. Am I still frozen?
Okay. No, now you're okay.
Okay.
So in a broad way, I tried to change the parenting paradigm for the reader, for the listener. And the way I did that was understand what is the current parenting paradigm and understand why it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because it's filled with ego, hierarchy, power, dominance, and control. So I shifted that and changed it to connection, understanding, empathy, non-judgment, right? And made the focus of parenting not the child, but the raising of the parent's self, and allowed the parent to see how much of their parenting was all about their own ego, their own inner thirst, their own inner hunger. And when you begin to see that, you're like, wow, I better just not talk at all, because everything out of my mouth is for me, my fear, my anxiety. And once the parent begins to understand their ego and begins to watch it and step away from it, now the opportunity to truly connect to the child becomes ample and available.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, do you think a lot of parents, the parenting approach still, the mainstream parenting approach is still, whether it's love and logic or some discipline approach, it's still kind of fix your kid? Do these techniques to kind of fix your kid. And that feels so infuriating sometimes to me. I worked at a wilderness therapy, several wilderness therapy programs with at-risk boys for years. That was my job. And it was inpatient, right? And we'd be out there months in the wilderness. And the parents would be home just chilling. And I kept, the kids would just go back home and go right back into their patterns because the family system didn't change. And so the industry started developing these aftercare programs where, again, someone else would parent the children because the parents were so like, I guess, not willing to do the work or something. They just continued to shepherd the kid into program after program after program. And that's cool if, I guess, you're unwilling to actually parent. But like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a travesty. And good for the kid that the kid is learning some skills, but what about the parent? And what a tragedy for the parent, because this is an opportunity. See, but if the populace doesn't look at life's purpose as self-growth, if self-growth is not the purpose, that's why we have what we have.
Absolutely.
If self-growth is the purpose, then we won't have to convince the parent to go grow. Then they'll understand, wow, any conflict in my life, it's me. I have to grow. I have to evolve. But because self-growth is such an alien concept for people, it's such an incidental goal. It's such a frill concept in their lives and not the fundamental premise like it is for you and me. That's why we have the life we have. If everyone took self-growth seriously, we would not have violence.
Absolutely.
We would not have war. We would not have bullying. We would not have the bad rap on divorce the way we do. We won't even have to get married because there will be growth as the fundamental premise, not all the legalities and formalities around it. We won't need to go and confess in church or think about heaven or hell because we don't need to be controlled by any dictums on the outside. We will believe in our own growth and self-govern.
Why are parents so scared to grow? Why are some parents so scared? Like, what's the big deal?
The paradigm has told them they don't have to grow. The paradigm has always told them that the answer is always on the outside of them, right? You have to understand there's two fundamental camps. And the camp that we're in, and I hate to make it sound dualistic, but it is. The camp that you and I are in and all your viewers are very firmly rooted in the principles of growth and dynamism and transformation. Then there's this whole other camp where there's no such thing as looking at the self. It's all about external focus. So the Botox, the surgery, the corner office, the Bentleys, the zip code, the belonging in a group, the wealth, the success. It's all about external focus. So those parents that we work with, we have to have great compassion for them because that's how they've been indoctrinated. They don't know that there's this other camp. Yeah. And that's why you and I do this work. We're like, hey, come yonder, come over to our camp and see how beautifully you can live your life when you begin taking responsibility for your growth. But they don't even know that there's this other camp. They are complete. That's why I said they're zombified and it's an illness.
Yeah.
It's so sad because they keep looking on the outside for somebody to blame, but they'll be wretched in their misery always.
Totally. Yeah, you got it. What can you, just so the listener has a tangible, like concrete example, would you be willing to share a moment with your daughter where you were stuck and like why, and then what eventually you did to grow and develop and why it was so helpful for you to grow yourself through that process? Is there any example you'd be willing to share?
I began to observe a pattern that whenever I felt my daughter was ungrateful to me and didn't recognize my sacrifice and martyrdom, oh my goodness, I would lose it. But I would be so clever because I'm a parent who's been raised the traditional way. I would pitch it as, oh, you're so ungrateful. You should go live in India and Africa. And I would pretend I was teaching her a moral lesson. Which was part of the deal. I mean, we should teach our children to be grateful. But the real reason I was reactive is because my need to be put on a pedestal and get a medal of honor for literally every meal I make or every good deed I do for my daughter, that need is my need. You see, when we become parents, we really think there'll be, a welcoming party for us every day and something for us. We do so much, damn it, and when nobody is giving us any reward. In fact, these little children don't even say thank you. So after a long day or after even a short day, when I began to notice that I was getting upset all the time when my daughter wasn't like licking my feet in gratitude, and then I was getting angry and pretending it was about morality and ethics, I then began to look at that pattern and I go, what is your need? why are you such a martyr and a victim? And many of us mothers especially have this, we feel very martyred about our self-sacrifice. And I had not made peace with my sacrifice. I didn't know it was so much giving. If I knew there was so much interminable giving, maybe I would reconsider. But, we don't know that it's like endless. So I had to really come to grips with the fact that I chose this and there's no way out now. And I better make peace with this giving and stop asking my daughter to acknowledge my choice. I need to really own my choice. So that was, it still shows up. It still shows up around food that I cook and take time to cook. And if she's not grateful, man, I just want to throw a tantrum. I want to throw the food against the wall and pack it up and send it to India or something dramatic, But really all it is that the kid just doesn't want to eat, Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be so personal. How old is she now?
Now she's 16. So
okay.
Now I've learned, because she's taught me to be quite immune to taking things personally. But yeah, it was a long road to get here.
That's so cool. They're such great teachers, right? Children, kids.
Amazing. If you're willing to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're willing to learn. If not, it's going to be a hard road.
Yes. Then it's going to be a nightmare.
Do you, what do you think about attachment theory and the impact that has on our brain, our nervous system, and our development through childhood and through adolescence? Like, do you?
Yeah, I love attachment theory. I mean, I believe in connection. As you know that.
Yeah.
I think where attachment theory can be misinterpreted is that women now plague themselves when they're not, wearing their baby 24/7 or with their baby all the time, and then mothers use it to guiltify themselves, to create more guilt. And I don't appreciate that. But that's not what attachment theory says. Attachment theory says to really honor that the early years are the significant moments where the foundation of connectivity is created. Attachment theory didn't tell us to do it 24/7, break our backs, feel guilty. But that's how we do it. We take it to that extent, to
Absolutely.
that. So I'm always giving parents permission, mothers especially. You don't have to be around your kid 24/7. You need to be a joyous person when you are. That's what's important.
Yeah. So in other words, like for a lot of moms and dads too, but I see this with moms especially, is almost the emotional fusion, enmeshment of like, we need to be together all the time. I've got to be there for their beck and call. And then a lot of those moms seem to need space, like they're letting their kids' emotions in a way run the show.
Yeah, and attachment theory I've seen, because of this misinterpretation, it actually fosters this deep dependence, anxiety. It's not being interpreted in a healthy way. Yeah,
and then these kids, and a lot of them are boys, they'll grow up and they have this kind of failure to launch syndrome. They're in their 20s and they're still living at home and their mom is still doing their laundry. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, a few rapid fire questions here. Play therapy, what do you think of play therapy?
I love play therapy, but again, I don't appreciate that the 3-year-old is in therapy and the parents are not. So technically, what is the kid doing there alone? You can do play therapy for 15, 20 minutes, but now you need the parent in the room.
Yeah. Okay. So again, it's fine as long as we're like also doing the work as parents, right?
Yeah. But I love play therapy. Love it.
Yeah, totally.
Play therapy, drama therapy, creative arts therapy, sand therapy. These are all indirect, evocative ways to get to the psyche. I love it.
Yeah, awesome. Love and logic?
Yeah, again, it's a beautiful approach. It is logical, but there's no point if the parent doesn't evolve. I try to heal the parent, because when the parent is healed, there is love and logic,
Yeah. Chores. What do you think about chores? Kids doing chores? What age should they start? Do you have an opinion on that? Like allowance, chores?
Yeah, I'm a little bit not the right person, because I'm easygoing about these things.
Yeah.
I've learned that we can be sticklers and control freaks, and children are children, and we were all messy as children and all disobedient. So we just need to chill a little bit. Yes, but chores are healthy and good, as long as they don't become a reason to control and play games with the kids.
Yeah. A lot of our listeners, this is largely, I'm into monogamy because I'm married and I have, 12 years and 2 kids. And so I take a stand for just long-term partnership because it's also an incredible growth path. And a lot of people, I've written some blog posts on this, is like why like a lot of parents stay in a dead marriage for the kids, for example. So what's your take on like, should parents stay married for the kids? I mean, I have a sense of what you're going to say, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
No, you think I'm going to say no, right?
I think you're going to say like the parents should be doing their work and be true to themselves in wherever path that takes them.
Yeah, but maybe a part of that is also saying, you know what, let me stay a little bit for the kids. That's okay. I think that's okay. I think that's healthy. I think that's good. But it's, again, the balance of how bad is it versus how bad will it be. And we don't know how bad it will be. That's in the future. But I definitely would say you don't just, the kids come first. And then we have to also manage ourselves, Yeah. But if, for example, if my kid is 4 years old and I'm not emotionally being abused, meaning also not physically abused, but the marriage is just dead, can I find a way to work with my partner to kind of create a new kind of marriage, right? We have to work to keep the children as the focus, especially when they're under, the age of 13, 14, 15. They're not capable of really handling too much emotion. They have their own stuff to deal with. So I am very careful about what I tell people. I'm all for growth. I'm all for daring. I'm all for courage. I'm all for change. But I'm also asking parents to always do it mindfully with the kids in the focus and then figure out whatever they need to figure out,
Yeah. I just hesitate when a person's been there long enough, and it's not bad, it's just not great, and they're not living their full life. They're resenting something because they're choosing to stay for the kids, and that's their rationale. But they're like, their life is sort of on hold, and I feel like they're not living their life.
Exactly. So again, it's about how to weigh the self-authentic process with the child's authentic needs.
Yeah.
And what is better, what is worse. It's a very complex interplay. It's not so easy. People think I'll say, oh, just leave. But I always say, okay, there's lots of complex factors. Let's really contemplate it. Once you have children, the whole game changes.
Yeah. I talk about growing up. I grew up I feel like I grew up, became an adult when I had kids,
Yeah. You can go along and just do whatever you want. Now you have to change the whole way of doing things.
Yeah, totally. Is there 2 more questions here? Do you feel like boys, I've interviewed a lot of people like Warren Farrell, and I get really interested and intrigued about people like you and your opinion about raising boys versus girls. And, my opinion, just to share it real quick, is part of the quote, masculinity problem in the world seems to me how we raise boys. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And I think boys are fundamentally disconnected from their feelings, their sexuality, their masculinity, and their femininity. So we are not allowing boys to integrate their aggression, their sexuality. Freud was right. Sex and aggression. They are primitive impulses that, unless are processed and allowed to exist in a conscious way, they will be manifesting pervertedly or dangerously. Yeah. But mothers at home and fathers need to not be afraid of a boy's aggression or sexuality. But typically, say, for example, if the boy is discovering his sexuality at the age of 14 and masturbating, what do? We don't talk about it. I mean, you would talk about it, but most fathers don't talk about it. Mothers don't want to see it. So we're suppressing it. Now, boom, that's what we're seeing in the adult world of men now is an underground sexuality that is unfettered and is really unconscious. So, but it began at home because the parents told the son, every son is masturbating, they can't help it, or having, ejaculations that they can't control. But nobody's teaching him how to manage this consciously and how to celebrate this part of which is wrong. Girls are menstruating, and we are getting more and more into celebrating our bodies and our daughters' bodies, but we're not celebrating our sons' bodies like that.
Right.
Boys should have a coming out party into their sexuality. But so just, we have to understand, why is this acting out problem so rampant?
Yeah.
It's because it starts in the house, right? Yeah. Because afraid of aggression and sexuality.
Yeah. And again, if you're listening, if you're on the growth path, then you get this and it's like, oh, cool. I've got to look at my own shit that's in the way of shepherding my son through his sexual experiences, right? And being there for him.
Right. And
versus afraid and, oh shit. And I'll just let him watch TV and like sports and kind of, he'll figure it out. Cause I'm like kind of ashamed and embarrassed about this conversation.
Exactly. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist and they'll figure it out on their own.
Yeah. How do you advise parents to keep their sex life after kids alive and awake and engaged?
Oh my goodness. I think the only answer to that is authenticity and, a commitment to growth. I think that's sexy. And I think when each of them does their own work, now we're presuming both are interested in self-growth, sure. Then I think sexuality becomes a natural outgrowth of that transparency, that natural bearing vulnerability. Sexuality can only be passionate, I believe, when we are passionate about ourselves. It can only be intimate when we're intimate with ourselves. It can only be connected when we're connected with ourselves. So all people want a passionate relationship, but they're living passionless lives. They all want intimate relationships, but they're all lying, right? So we have to get really honest with what great sex really is about. It's more than just the form. It's all about this energetic bonding and connection that can only come when you are grounded in that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just sex, and that's easy to have.
Yeah. Cool. Shefali, one last question here, and then we'll leave the listener with where to find you. So I ask every guest, so I founded this relationship school and we're on a mission to reach 1 million teens and young adults with relationship education, because one of my beliefs is that, because I never had a relationship class in high school or college, right? So wouldn't it be cool if more young people got educated and hip to these conversations? What kind of world would that create? So in that vein, I ask my guests, like, okay, if I was speaking to 1,000 high school kids right now, and you could whisper one piece of advice into my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
That unless you begin understanding yourself, you won't find someone that understands you. Something like that.
Boom. Wow. That's a good one.
The delusion is that, I'll find somebody to make me happy.
Yeah.
Right. We want to bust that you cannot find somebody to make you happy.
Yeah. And our life can be more fulfilled with a partner sometimes.
No. It will be fulfilled with a partner, but only after you're fulfilled with yourself.
Cool. Shefali, where can people find you?
Well, on my website, it's drshefali.com, or find me on Facebook. And I typically post what I'm up to there.
Awesome. And she's got tons of great books, The Conscious Parent, among others. So if you're a parent and you want more info, or if you're a person on the path and just want to wake up more, check this woman out.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for all the work you do.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, good stuff here with Dr. Shefali. Go check her out, drshefali.com. All right, she's doing some cool work out there. Action step for therapists and action step for parents. Okay, listen up. And if you're not a parent, you might be a dog owner or a pet owner. You can apply potentially to this. Therapists, I want you to re-listen to the first part where she was talking about the empath and the narcissism that a lot of therapists, coaches, empaths have. And just do a quick journal assignment about that. Okay. If you want to challenge yourself more, you send it to a friend. Hey, I just got confronted with a podcast. Check it out. Give them the link and say, this was cool. I learned this about myself, that sometimes I help people because I'm narcissistically getting something out of that, versus I'm helping people from my heart, in a genuine way that's actually generative for them. Love that. Okay. In our coaches training, we really confront coaches on this to clean this part of their helping up. And I'm really proud of who our coaches are becoming and have become, because they're learning to help in a very effective way, not an enabling way or an arrogant way. Okay, parents, write down the thing that triggers you the most about your kid, and answer this question. What does this say about me? And what am I going to do about my trigger here to help my child Okay, just finish that exercise. Same thing if you got a dog owner. If you're not a parent or a dog owner, do it with a friend. Like, what is this that triggers me about this other person say about me? Okay, all right. We're still enrolling for the Deep Psychology of Intimate Relationships. We still have a couple spots in our coaches training. Check us out, relationshipschool.com/DPIR if you want to apply. We'd love to get an application from you and talk to you. We're filling up fast. We got a full group. It's really looking good. Got a lot of warriors stepping up to the plate that will permanently change this part of their life. Oh yeah. Okay, everybody. Thanks and be well. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.